Will be here then. Emma Trimble is here as well. We're looking through some of the stories on the front pages of the papers. And the Daily Mail, I have to say, has got a slightly different one, Emma. 4 million face monster hike to council tax. I thought we just had a monster hike to council tax, but apparently there's a 25% rise coming in some cash-strapped local authorities. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? Because we talk about growth in the economy. Most local authorities are either on the brink of going bankrupt or have gone bankrupt and are just going to keep milking us for more and more money. And that's the loophole. Yeah. So actually, legally, they're not allowed. So it says local authorities are permitted to raise council tax by up to 4.99%. Not sure why it's 99% rather than 5%. Anyway, so that's what they're legally allowed to do. But this is talking about raising bills by as much as 25%. Right. And the reason why they can do that is because if they claim that they're bankrupt, then they can basically charge you as much as they like to stay afloat. Wow. But of course, people know from their own experiences that it's not just that your bill is going up, but it's also you're getting less for your money. Yes. So our bins are only collected once every 2 weeks. If you're in a building with multiple people, that rubbish piles up pretty quickly. Right. They're obviously trying to encourage you also to recycle, so they pick those bins up more regular. 65 different bins, you know. According to the list inside the paper, the council tax hike is going to hit these places worse. Windsor and Maidenhead, 25% up. Hampshire, 15%. North Somerset, Bradford, also 15%. Newham in East London, 10%. Cheshire East, Birmingham and Slough, all between 9 and 10 and 8%. But instead we should be looking at why these councils are mismanaging the money so badly. Right. Because there's no excuse, there's no reason why they should be going bankrupt. They've got huge incomes, haven't they? And there doesn't seem to be any accountability for how they actually spend money. Right. If maybe it is, you know, it could be a scandal in the local press, very unlikely to become something in the national press if somebody were to find out that, you know, as you would with the government, that X is being spent on something initiative that's obviously wild and not a good use of taxpayer money. Yeah. But I think that there's less of a kind of less attention is paid to the way that councils waste people's tax money. And realistically, councils shouldn't really cost that much to run. The money that you pay to your council should go on almost directly onto the services that you receive, whether it's filling in potholes, whether it's picking up your bins, keeping the high street nice, things like that. And I think, you know, that these councils are probably wasting money on all sorts of. I think there was a story recently that they were giving some kind of. Was it like a blender or something like that? Some kind of kitchen device to the elderly. So just giving them away, Well, I mean, one of the things they say, one of the things they say they waste a lot of money on, of course, is social care, because that's kind of, you know, exponentially exploded in terms of how much. But even then, people have to sell their homes in order to pay for it. But that's it. So they because they don't know what they're doing. Again, it comes back down to incompetence, in my view. You know, 75 to 80% of most council tax money goes to pay the people who work for the council and to fund their pensions, because there's so many of them. Half of them, at the very least, don't even turn up for work every day. Some of them are even talking about selling off their buildings because they don't use them anymore. Well, maybe because nobody goes in. Maybe the problem is that the councils have become, and I use the term lightly, too professionalised. Yes. And actually, the way that councils, you know, the sort of spirit behind local councils is that people volunteer their time because they have a civic spirit and they want to, but it's something that is democratically accountable and so on, rather than this being something that people see as a cash cow. But those are the councillors, and those are the guys that don't cost very much money, but it's the people behind the scenes that cost all the money, where you've got, I mean, I remember back in 20 years ago practically, when I was working in Edinburgh, the chief executive of Edinburgh Council was making £500,000 a year, and they claimed that was because they had. But instead, the binman should be paid well. Yeah, exactly. And somebody actually, I think, you know, it's a job for a journalist out there. Somebody needs to go and find out how exactly they are wasting their money. I wouldn't mind betting that they're wasting an awful lot of money on all sorts of DEI initiatives and roles like the NHS that are not real jobs. Inclusivity roles and things like that really are not necessary. Almost certainly. Before we move on to a couple who flew to Spain and back again in order to buy a car because it was cheaper than travelling by train inside of Britain, let's get back to Donald Trump, because we've got Donald Trump cancelling tax on tips. This is when he happened to pop into Las Vegas on his way back from California, I think. Check it out.
Young waitress. I won't say beautiful because you're not allowed to say that as a politician. Used to be you could say a young, beautiful waitress. This was a young, beautiful waitress, but I won't say that because I feel like I want to continue my political career. If you call the governor won't say it. If you call a woman beautiful today, it's the end of your political career, so I won't do it. But a young waitress, I think you could call young. You're probably not even supposed to say young. Probably supposed to say a waitress. But a young waitress came up and I said, how are you doing? And in my restaurant in the hotel in Trump, I said, how are you doing? And she said, not great, because they're after me so viciously for tips. They just want my tip income and they don't believe me and all of this. And she said, it's terrible. You know, sir, you should have no tax on tips. I said, what? So what'd you just say? No tax on tips. That was about the amount of my consultation. It's true.
So now he's going to cancel the tax on tips.
God, I love him.
And he's now the hero for all young, beautiful waitresses in Las Vegas, who all will probably want to go and work for him. You know, but he is very funny. I mean, he's actually become a very amusing. I said this before he got in, that just watching him campaigning, he's clearly changed. He was quite angry in 2016, even more angry in 2020. Now he's kind of mellow.
He's become a grandfather.
Yeah, but he's funny though. I mean, he's actually funny.
So. The speech that he gave after the inauguration speech, he gave a sort of more casual one
it was a bit
to one of the
rambly,
other
that
rooms.
one, wasn't it?
It was very rambly, but it was also very funny.
Yeah.
I thought, you know, I could fall asleep listening to this. It was entertaining. I mean, he's like a comedian.
He is.
And also, I think, I mean, with the tip thing, he's pulled a blinder because as I was in America just before the election and just at the sort of like beginnings of the campaign, and I didn't realise that the tipping culture in America is as it is.
It is
whereas
amazing,
here you can get away without tipping, whereas there, if you don't tip, you've really committed some kind of serious faux pas.
And you've got to give them sort of 20%,
borderline
haven't
criminal.
you? Yeah, and you've got to give them a lot of money as well.
And so I think he's pulled a blinder on this because culturally speaking, this is a big thing.
Yeah.
The fact that he's just listened to this waitress. And I believe him when he says that's the extent of his consultation on it. He's listening to people who are sort of at the, to use a horrible turn of phrase, the coalface of society.
Right.
This is something that it's a small act that will make a big difference for a lot of people in America because tipping is such a big thing.
Yeah.
And also, two birds with one stone, something you're not allowed to say. What is it?
Right.
You feed two birds with one scone is what Peter wants you to say.
Oh, is that what they want you to say now? I'm not saying that.
And so he's not only, you know, made a small change with a big impact, but it's also something that's kind of culturally symbolic for Americans to you know.
Well, it's one of the ways as well that people who, for years, for decades, for probably generations of people have come to America from all parts of the world, and they've ended up working in restaurants, they've ended up working in kitchens, they've ended up working in catering, because that, you know, they used to have a joke in New York when I lived there that, you know, how do you empty the restaurant? You run in there and shout, immigration's coming, you know, and basically everybody runs out of the kitchen and all the waiters leave because they're all illegal, you know, but many of them come in and that's the job of work that they do, and they made their money on tips because they could be under the counter, they didn't have to have a social security card, you know, it's more difficult now in the digitalised society, but basically they could work and earn pretty good money,
and it's a big part of
cash in hand, and they wouldn't be paid very much for actually doing the job, but they'd make their money on tips.
You're saying that Trump is pro illegal migrant, Mike?
Well, you know, wouldn't that be unusual? He probably would have been in the past, you know. Let's talk about illegal migrants. A Cornish couple travelling to Crewe, who live in Cornwall, decided to have a day in Malaga en route, saving themselves £250. Now, I know you've been on the train recently. Basically, they flew 1,300 miles to pick up a new car because where they live in Cornwall, it was going to take them too much. It was going to cost them something like £200 per person for a one-way journey to get to Crewe to pick up the car. So they flew to Spain and flew back to Manchester, and then I presume took a train from Manchester to Crewe, saved themselves a bucket load of money. Amazing.
I'm not remotely surprised by this. It's interesting given how much you know, everyone's encouraged to take the trains because of the climate and so on, rather than drive or rather than take planes. But the reality is that the train system is so broken, everything's so expensive.
It's really bad.
I flew to Scotland because it was cheaper to fly than to take the train.
It's also complicated because you don't ever know how to do it. I went to Edinburgh, famous. I told the story back in November to go to Alex Salmond's memorial. And you can't buy a ticket, just a straight ticket. You have to buy 2 tickets. You have to go in 2 bits. I mean,
so you did
crazy.
It's called a split save or something.
But
you don't have to do that. You can pay more if you want to.
No, I know, but I went onto the app, right, and basically I just asked for a ticket, and it sort of gave me these choices, and so I went with the cheapest option, and I didn't, as it turned out, have to get off the train at all.
Well, it's so confusing as well with all these different options. You don't know if you're paying too much.
Right.
Whereas, you know, you can... if you book far enough in advance, you can get to the Netherlands for cheaper than you can get to... even to get to Oxford on a peak ticket. You can, I'm sure if you book far enough in advance, you can get to the Netherlands for cheaper than that, or at least around about the same amount of money. But when you go to other European countries, I'm thinking of places like Oslo. I was astonished by it. Their trains are just wonderful. The ticketing system is so clear. You don't have to speak the language to be able to navigate the railway system.
Well, you just want to be able to go, look, I want to buy a ticket from here to there. There it is. Thank you very much indeed. The end. Instead of which, with this country, you get handed a sort of, you know, a book of hieroglyphics, effectively, in some digital form, and you have to go, well, I didn't really want to go via Lancaster, or I didn't want to change over there.
And if you book it on an app, that's one thing. But if you pay for your ticket at one of those booths, in other countries you get one ticket. Here, they just keep coming out. If you were from another country and you weren't expecting 100 tickets to come out of the machine, and then you have to fumble through trying to find which one, and then holding up the queue. If you were from another country, you might just take the first one that comes out and walk away and not realise that there are another 100 that you've got to wait to come out.
It is just ridiculous. Let's get another voice note. Simon, this time on Trump.
Good morning, Mike. It's Simon from Devon. Oh, Donald Trump is in that full-on art of the game mode with Starmer, isn't he? Saying he likes Starmer. I remember he went to Korea and said he liked Kim Jong-un as well. Oh, I love it. See you, Mike. Bye.
I mean, it's true, isn't it, Simon? It's a bit like, you feel like poor old Starmer, you know, he's being played with like a cat that's got a mouse. And he's just kind of batting him around and then stroking him a little bit, giving him something to eat and going, yeah, you'll be all right, you know. I mean, it's just ridiculous. How about this one from Tony? Mike, which is it, net zero or growth? Has anyone told Ed Miliband about the change in policy? I don't know whether they have, but there's a piece in the Mail today where it says Ed Miliband wants his own personal photographer. You might remember Angela Rayner's got one. So he's now decided, because he's had so many bad pictures taken of himself, particularly the eating the bacon sandwich one, that he wants his own photographer and he wants us to pay for it. It's nice, isn't it?
They don't need
these people think they are.
Well, I think they think they're celebrities.
Yeah, I think they do.
All of them are too big for their boots. I really, it's interesting. I think that we were talking about civic spirit in local councils, but there's also an element of, you know, you want civic spirit amongst your parliamentarians. And if you remember the backlash against Rupert Lowe when he decided to not accept his MP's salary personally and instead to donate it in various ways to his constituents, people lost their minds over that, as if he was doing some kind of awful thing. Maybe because they felt that their salary, that they were going to be looked upon as if they were being selfish by not doing the same with their salaries. But I think
that's what they're worried about.
People talk, you know, over and over again in the various ways that politicians are out of touch. But the idea that you would need a personal photographer,
I know,
that this is something that's important, that optics really, I mean, obviously optics are important in politics, but they shouldn't be as important as they are. And that bacon sandwich thing, I don't think that made anybody think any less of Ed Miliband in a way. It was sort of endearing.
No, people think Ed Miliband's an idiot, not because he can't eat a bacon sandwich, but because he's an idiot.
And because he wants a photographer.
Well, yeah, and also it's because of what he says. It's not because of how he looks, to be frank. I mean, if he wants to go out and play ukulele in front of a wind turbine, the answer, my friends, are blowing in the wind, really? Well, people are going to take the mickey, I'm afraid. By the way, sales of harmonicas are up, apparently. This is an unusual one, because of this new Bob Dylan movie, you know, which I haven't seen. Everyone says it's great.
I have.
Have you? Is it good?
I have, which is rare for me because normally I don't see films in the cinema at all. Well, I'm a big Bob Dylan fan, but more so massive Joan Baez fan. So I could not go to see a film that had both of them in it.
Does it do them justice?
I think it's I think Timothee Chamolet is, as much as I dislike his politics, I think he's a brilliant actor. I think it was a good film, and by the general standards of Hollywood, it was a good film.
Yeah, is it shorter than 3 hours long? Is there
it is shorter than 3 hours.
It
is actually quite long, but I thought it sort of zoomed by.
They've given up making short films. I haven't been to see a movie in the cinema because I wouldn't be able to stay awake.
Well, I went to see The Irishman, and I had to walk out before it was finished because somebody needed to have.
I still haven't finished it. I started about 2 years ago.
Somebody needed the chutzpah to tell him that he needs an editor.
Seriously, yeah, it's true. You know, they've all gone mad. They've all gone, no, I don't need it. I'm such a genius. I'll just do a 5-hour movie or something. You know, ridiculous. Emma is here. Emma Trimble.